No.
Okay.
I don't use Audacity. I use voice recorder. It's fancy.
Or whatever.
Ooh,
Came on my computer.
different.
That's a Jeff Miller special. He's like, don't waste your time with any of that stuff.
Hey, remember that conversation we just had about your mom, Dan? Maybe we had that conversation about you and Audacity.
No, I'm not. Come on, no, let's not get too crazy. Okay, let's. Is everybody ready?
Yeah, let's do it.
Yeah, I think so.
Everybody record in 3, 2, 1, hit it.
Good to go.
All right, we'll start here momentarily. Is this 256?
256. That's what you wrote on your agenda, so let's go with that.
Well, I looked before I put that on there. We do one every week, Chad.
You guys are crazy. There's no off season.
There is no off season. You're right about that. Okay, Aaron, we are coming down the line in just a few seconds. Welcome to the 256th edition of the DLF Dynasty podcast. I am your host, Dan Myler, and I'm joined this week by a couple of fellow DLF scribes. One you've heard a lot from here on DLF, Matt Price. How are you doing, buddy?
I'm doing good, man. Tons of rookie auctions going on, so it's a great time to talk about what we're going to talk about today.
Yeah, we're going to talk about that with yourself and the latest addition to the DLF crew. Our good friend Chad Scott is back in the fold. I feel, Chad, like we should hear T.I. in the background with "I'm Back,"
Right?
Banging through the speakers right now. Good. Welcome back, buddy. I'm so glad you are becoming a regular host on the DLF Dynasty podcast. Chad, welcome. And gosh, I just can't say enough how jacked I am that you're going to be part of the crew.
Thanks, man. I really appreciate it. I'm just happy to be back at DLF. Happy to be back on a podcast with you fellows and Jeff Miller every now and again, I guess. But, it'll be a good time, man. It's good to get back into it, and I'm excited to start it off with you guys.
Yeah, for those that don't know, we lost some fellow podcasters in the last couple of weeks. Our buddy George, he has moved on to greener pastures, I guess. Nick has done the same. So we're not going to hear as much from those fellas, but we're hoping that they check in from time to time. Chad, you got some pretty big shoes to fill. It's got to feel a little bit like a homecoming, though, coming back to DLF, huh?
Yeah, it really is. This is always kind of a family. And that's when I left. I remember saying that in my kind of closing email to the Kens, Jeff and Eric and everybody. Just how this has always been a close-knit sort of family environment. And it seems like it's stayed true since I've left. And, I'm just excited to be a small part of that back again. So,
yeah, we certainly are. And for those of you that don't know, Chad has a long list, shopping list of accolades and achievements in the dynasty industry, formerly of the Fake Goods Pod and the fakefootball.com and so many other things. I'm sure you've all heard of Chad, so we won't waste too much time talking about that. Our topic for this podcast is going to be rookie auctions and rookie auction strategy. It's a really unique format. Not a lot of people use it, but it is gaining popularity for sure. True story, a couple of weeks ago when I was starting to think about this episode and putting this thing together, I was actually considering options for who to add as a guest to join me and Matt. And Chad Scott was on top of the list. No doubt. A few days later, we get an email. Chad's joining the crew. He's going to be on the pod with you. It didn't take much to ask Chad for his first official appearance, I guess, back on the DLF Dynasty podcast to be this one. So we're going to cover rookie auction strategy. I figured we'd get some of the rookie auction strategy 101 stuff out of the way right away before we dive into some major strategy stuff. Chad, I'm going to start with you since you're the new guy. What are the major differences between a rookie draft and a rookie auction for you? And would you rather participate in a draft or an auction? Which one's more fun?
All right. So for me, I think rookie draft is better. Just for the league really kind of just jumps in and starts offering trades all the time to kind of move up, maybe move down. And so I really like that aspect. Kind of dynasty leagues they get a little hibernated after the Super Bowl. And then once when rookie draft starts, it's kind of like a feeding frenzy. So I kind of really like the draft aspect. But it has to be a startup auction, obviously. But I think the best part of rookie auctions is kind of having middling money and just going all in on like somebody you really like early, like as your first nomination, and hoping like it just kind of carries through for what you didn't like go all in with, and you kind of get a deal on that first guy, and then you can kind of piece together some other rookies after that. That's kind of my favorite thing to do.
Yeah, interesting. You'd rather draft. I think a lot of guys that once they try a rookie auction, they kind of get hooked on that. Any chance to get into an auction, and you mentioned startup auction, or startups absolutely have to be auctions. I could not agree more. Matt, what do you think? Would you rather draft or auction, and what are the biggest differences between the two in your perspective?
I might be a little bit biased because I, like you, Dan, I'm almost always kind of a win now kind of player. So I like the auctions better because it allows me to potentially get a guy that I would never have a chance at in a rookie draft, unless I'm going to move a heavy amount of assets to do it. And in a rookie auction, I can just like Chad just said, I can take whatever my 10th place money is, 12th place money is, and, go all in on a guy and potentially get one of those top, 5 to 6 guys. Like in this class, we're going to talk about, there's a group of 6 guys that most people feel comfortable with. And it's certainly possible for somebody at the bottom half of an order in an auction to go up and grab one of those guys, whereas I think it's quite a bit more difficult in a draft setting. So yeah, I prefer the rookie auction mostly just because of that.
Yeah, I'm so glad you're with us, Chad, because usually we all kind of share a brain on stuff, and just the fact that you step into the batter's box and you disagree with Matt right away, that's great, because Matt and I usually share an opinion most of the time, 80-90%. That's good. We'll let you guys square off on that just a little bit as we go along here. So before we get right to the strategy and stuff, I think the potential to get that big deal to steal a player from another owner is the biggest gain that you can if you do an auction rather than a draft. There are a few other benefits to doing auction over draft or draft over auction. One of them that I like to compare is when you have a lot of second round draft picks in a draft, and you try to package up to move up into the first round or get high in the draft or a late first with a couple seconds, it's really difficult to do. When you're trying to trade money, it seems to me like you can package an equal amount of money and it looks like a lot more when it's cash, and you can get up into that top tier a little bit easier. So I've seen that as a benefit as well. So let's kind of get into the strategy as we move along here. First off, Matt, how do you prepare for an auction? And is it any different than in a draft?
I wouldn't say it's that much different for rookie auctions. Now, a startup auction is a totally different story, and I won't get sidetracked here, but the preparation for that is a lot different for me. And in terms of the rookies, I like to put them in tiers. I'm a very big proponent of tier-based drafting, and I think that it's even more important in an auction. So I think it's even more important to be clear on where those tier breaks are for yourself so that you can know how much to budget for, each individual tier, say. I personally don't stick to a budget as much in a rookie auction as I do in, say, a startup auction. In a startup auction, your budget is very important, but in a rookie I don't really care if I have to spend, most of my money to go up and get that guy. You know what I mean? So I think it's really important to have even more clarity on how you feel about individual players in an auction so that you can feel comfortable going up and overspending for a guy if you have to.
Yeah, that's a really good point, Chad. What do you think? What's your strategy, your basic strategy going into an auction?
I really don't have a strategy.
You're just a shoot from the hip guy?
That guy looks good. I'll bet on him. You've been in these auctions with me long enough to know I just kind of shoot from the hip. But Mostly, like I was saying, like if I have a lot of money, I do kind of have a strategy of what I'll do with it. But when I have that, as Matt was saying, that 10th, 11th, 12th place money, I typically go all in on somebody in one of those top tiers if they're available.
Yeah, it really depends on the rules, right?
Yeah.
It's so hard to make that first nomination, and you touched on a little bit, Chad. That first nomination is critical, especially if you're a 10th, 11th, 12th overall money. You want that guy, if you're trying to put all your money in on him, you don't want to shoot too high, so you immediately get outbid, and then you can't nominate for a day or 2 days sometimes. There are also other rules where sometimes you can nominate 2 players in a day, so you spread out those nominations, wait to get outbid on that first guy, and then throw that second guy up there. So I agree with you guys. If you're lower on the totem pole, you throw all your money at one guy and try to land a bigger fish than what your boat can kind of handle. Matt, is there anything else as far as strategy goes?
And then that strategy is also great because you force those guys with a lot of money to really, nail down the ones that they actually want to go for. Because if you can say, like in this year's class, somebody's really into McCaffrey and you just put all of your money on him, and he was hoping to get McCaffrey and Fournette out of the top tier, then you can force them to only get one of those guys. So it's just, there's just so many more things you can do as a guy who has less money in an auction. We can go up and trade for more, or you can just force those guys with a lot of money to overspend perhaps on a player that they didn't necessarily want to spend that much on.
Yeah, let's talk about this a little bit more, having less money, because we're all really good dynasty players, right? All 3 of us sitting at the table here.
I'm pretty terrible,
so we're all. I say that tongue in cheek, of course, but when you're sitting down there and you look at those big figures in front of you, and those other guys are sitting there with so much money that they're thinking, man, I'm going to come out with 3 of these top 6, or I'm going to come out with my top 2 guys overall. If you're sitting down there, a strategy, if I do have a strategy when I'm lower, it's that I want to make sure these 6 or these 8 or these 9 guys go for at least all of my money. I want to make 100% sure that they all do. I'm not going to let anybody get a steal, especially somebody that has all the money. So when you're doing that nomination, Chad, let's say you're 10th. You have $100 and the top guy has $500, and you're so far behind that legitimately this guy could get 4 or 5 guys before you get one, if it falls outright. Who's that first nomination? What kind of guy are you targeting? Are you targeting a guy that goes 5th overall in rookie drafts? Are you targeting the guy that goes 10th to make sure you get a guy that you should get? What are you trying to do?
I'm probably going with like a Mixon type. Someone who's kind of polarizing, but everybody wants, obviously, on their teams. And I'm making sure I get that bid in like first, if possible. Like I want that first bid, so somebody can't just sit and wait for their auction to close and then outbid me before my auction closes. So I want to be near the top in the first of the bids.
So you say you don't have a strategy, but that sounded like all strategy right there, Chad.
It's only on that first day, really.
Okay, that first day. And it is important. I couldn't agree with you more. I think about it a lot leading up to. I'm one of those guys when an auction is going to start at midnight, because the days run midnight to midnight. Yep. I'm sitting there at my computer at midnight waiting to hit that nominate button and putting that big bid in. How about you, Matt? Do you differ any when you're low on that totem pole?
Yeah, because I generally don't throw a big bid on right away, because when you're a small stack, if we're going to talk in poker terms, and it's a proxy auction. If you put a big bid on, say, Mixon, say you have $100 and you put all 100 on him, and he just keeps creeping up, and it takes a day or two to actually, outbid you when you're probably going to get outbid anyway, then it just locks you up and you can't really do anything else. So I kind of like to see it play out a little bit. If I see getting close down to the wire, say we've got, I don't know, less than 8 hours or so on a 24-hour clock, and Mixon is still sitting there at $30, then yeah, I'm going to go throw a big bid on him and try to bump up that proxy at least. But I kind of like to sit back after I get that first nomination out and see how the board's going to play out, so I can kind of throw my money. Let's say Mixon is already at $100 or at $99, and I've got $100 on him and I can't get off of him. But say Cook is in the same tier, I have him in the same tier, and he's only $30 and is about to go off the clock. So I kind of like to have that flexibility early and throw my money in one fell swoop. And I feel like it's the spot to do it rather than do it right from the beginning.
Yeah, and that's a good point, Matt, to have that flexibility. I'm usually a big proponent of that. But in this case, I really feel like the deck's stacked against you already. There's probably a small chance that you end up with one of those top 6 guys if that's what we're talking about this year. Even smaller if it's years like last year or the year before when there's only 2 or 3 really big coveted names and everybody's chasing that 2 or 3 guys. This year it's a little bit looser because it seems like there's more in that top tier. So, I kind of lean towards Chad's perspective or his philosophy or strategy because I feel like if you get that in and it keeps getting walked up, especially if all those other big names are on the board at the same time, there are a lot of other fish in the sea for these other owners to try to throw bids on. And when you, Matt, you're sitting there with the 10th or 11th money and I'm there with a 10th or 11th money, if I already have my money on Mixon, in this case, the example we're talking about, and you see the other deal, the other guy that's at 30 and that's in the same tier, you're going to go spend your money on him rather than me with Mixon, and then I sneak through with Mixon. If I lose him after a day, I really didn't lose much, right, Chad? We're going to end up just putting in our next nomination, and maybe we're talking about the 8th or 9th guy on the list, whoever didn't get nominated on day one, or pivoting to somebody that did get nominated on day one that we like just as much or almost as much.
And that's why, like, I only do that if I'm like the first 1, 2, or 3 to nominate, just because I know if somebody does outbid me, I have more flexibility kind of go down the line.
Right. Flexibility is a big deal in all auctions, I believe. When you have the deck stacked against you, the thing I always say is you're probably not going to get one of these guys anyway. So I try to I kind of throw the flexibility out the window. I will say though, Matt, you're right on one thing, that if you keep your options open and you're sitting in a room full of guys that for some reason don't like the guy that you like, or you like second on your list that you didn't nominate, you do have the flexibility to jump in and maybe even get that potential steal on day one in an auction.
Yeah, I think you're right. It definitely depends on the draft class. Like this year, the top tier is pretty deep compared to even last year. And say like Gurley and Amari Cooper's year, that's a move I would make on one of those top 2 guys when there's a clear like top 2 guys. But a guy like this in a year like this where there's, I think at least 4 guys that you can interchange and, arguably 6. I think I would prefer that flexibility and be able to get like the last spot on that tier so that I have more money to use somewhere else if I have to. That depends if I want Fournette and I know that I'm going to have to put all my $100 on there right away. And if I get outbid, then that's fine too. But I think in a class like this where I'm happy having 4 or 5 of those top guys, then I would rather kind of take the cheapest of the 5.
Okay, so we talked a little bit about those playoff teams, those guys with the lower half money. Now we had one of those rough years, or maybe we made a bunch of trades and got a lot of extra money, even though championship team with a bunch of extra money, we do it Ryan McDowell style, and win the championship but still have all the cash for the rookies. What's the strategy change on that, Matt? What are you doing differently when you're that top guy on the list, second or third on the list and the money list?
Yeah, I think it depends on it depends on how bad my team is and how many pieces I need. I generally, if I can avoid it, I don't like to draft or auction based on need. But sometimes it's important. If I'm a bottom dwelling team, I'm really going to try to get 2 or 3 of those top guys. So like you guys, I'm going to try to set that bar early, just like when you're the low stack. If I can set a price above what other teams can get to, I think I'm going to go ahead and do that first to get that guy off the board as quick as possible so I can free up the rest of that money to go on and take shots elsewhere. So it depends. Like I'm generally probably not going to just take 10 or 15 seconds. I mean, I'm still going to try to get one or two of those studs early and try to build up the roster that way.
Yeah, I'm similar. If I have a shot at that top guy, I'm gonna take my shot at him. But it does. Go ahead.
I was just saying, it really depends on, I think you really have to pay attention to the cash of everybody else when you're the big stack. You know what I mean? So you really have to know how much can I budget and spend on this player here, and then still be able to get my next target over on this guy. So I think that part is even more important when you're the big stack.
That's exactly.
You analyze this stuff, don't you?
Well, yeah.
You're like number crunching. I'm like drinking. I'm like, oh, I'll bid on this guy.
Well, sometimes my opinion changed while I'm talking on the air, Chad. So I may have just totally done a full 180 there, you know?
Yeah. Well, you mentioned earlier, Matt, that you don't have a budget when it comes, or not quite as much when it comes to a rookie auction. Yeah. And I'm the same way. I especially don't if I'm a low guy, because I'm going to sit there like Chad is, sitting there drinking my beer. Well, that looks like a pretty good deal. I'm going to bid on him. But when you're a high guy, and you got the most money, you have to you have to play that chess game a little bit, and like you said, Matt, know what everybody else has and how many guys you can come out with. You don't want to get into a bidding war when you're the big guy. If you lose out on one to the second place guy or the second most money, that means you really have the most money, and you can stack up talent after that.
I mean, for you guys, and I'm going to ask this to both of you, it's harder to play with the big stack than it is the smaller stack, right?
There's way more pressure. Way more pressure.
It's more stressful for
pressure,
sure. Yeah.
Stressful, yes.
Yeah.
Because I feel like it's so much easier to blow it with a big stack. Yep. You know what I mean? Like if you end up spending all of your money or half of your money on like one guy, and now you can't build with the rest of your cash, you know, it's really a tough situation.
Yeah. Right. I had a situation like that just a week and a half ago where I wasn't the guy, but I watched a guy do exactly what you're talking about. Two guys in the same room that for some reason love Fournette. And there's a lot of things to love about Fournette. We don't have to really get into that, but loved him enough that he was going to go for almost twice as much as the other top rookies. So, and they kept going back and forth to the point where when one bowed out, the other one immediately, who was sitting with the second most money immediately after the auction, you should have the feeling of, I won the guy. I got the guy I wanted. But instead, all of a sudden, he was down to 11th in money. He should have walked out of there with two of those top 6 or 8 guys at least, and instead sat at the end with Fournette and whatever you got else after that. So I think if we come out of anything so far in this conversation, it's probably that if you're that big money guy, if you're the big stack, Matt, you don't want to get into that bidding war, even if you truly love the player.
Oh, no, there's no worse feeling than to, hey, I got the guy that I wanted, but guess what? The second place money got every single other player. You know what I mean? So, and that's easy to let happen if you get too enamored with a player. That's why I think you really need to get that clarity on each individual player, and if not player, at least the tier, so you know how comfortable you are at spending at each level there.
Absolutely. And at some point, at some basic point of this whole process, whether you're drafting or auctioning these rookies, we are throwing darts at a dartboard. Nobody knows for sure anything. And when you have the most money, it seems logical to me that you'd want 3 darts rather than 1, especially even when you're talking about those top guys. So to get a few of those guys on your roster, to give yourself that flexibility in case I miss on him, at least I have him. This guy, in his case, was a very poor team, and he's got all his marbles in the Fournette basket. And if that doesn't go the way he sees, he's going to be the top guy on the totem pole for the years to come as well. Chad, it seems like you had something you wanted to add?
No.
Oh, excellent. Chad's leaning in like he's going to say something, I thought, insightful and drop some knowledge on us. And instead, I'm good.
I'm good.
So let's talk a little bit about some of the other strategies that can go on that we've seen happen in auctions. There are guys that go after that number one guy, and obviously it depends where you're at on the totem pole, how much money you really have. But you see it all the time, guys at the top of the food chain spreading out the money. You see them not necessarily going after those top tier players. I think we see it more in other seasons, in other years when the tier isn't quite as big. But when there's 1 or 2, last year especially, we saw it a lot with Zeke. A guy with the top money stayed in on Zeke for a little while, but then bowed out and chose to go after a few of the next tier. Have you guys ever employed that strategy? Chad, since you had nothing to say on the last one, you don't have to talk on this one either. Matt,
Thank you.
Matt, have you ever employed a strategy like that, and how did it work out for you?
Yeah, I mean, if you are going to come off of your top guy like that, then it certainly behooves you to kind of siphon as much money as you can out of the guy that is adamant about bidding you up. So I've never personally had to do that because I've never had that much dynasty money in a rookie auction. No, I'm just kidding.
Well, humble brag. Boy.
No, but I mean, that's definitely a strategy I would do if I was in that situation. But I just feel like in most classes, there's not a guy that I feel that strongly about that I'm going to let myself get that high on him. I guess Zeke was a little bit of a different situation last year. Like Zeke was just far and away ahead of everybody else. But I think in most years, there's at least one or two other guys that I like just as much as the top guy.
Yeah, and even for me last year, I felt like Treadwell was, and I guess pie in my face, I felt like Treadwell was a worthy number 2. I felt really good about him. And if I ended up coming off of Zeke and ending up with Treadwell plus something, I usually felt pretty good. Now, that hasn't worked out to this point, but I feel pretty confident that I would employ the same strategy if I came upon it again in the future where I felt that way. Chad, what do you think? Are you ever the kind of guy that'll spread it out, if whether you're on top or in the middle, try to get multiple players like we see sometimes, or you pretty much stick to that, get a guy you're really happy with?
I do. There will be times where I spread out my money, but I'm not spreading it out to where, there's my proxy's like a few dollars more than the next guy's. You know what I mean? Like, so if I'm gonna spread it out, like I'm gonna bring like my hammer of Thor and like it'll be like a $50 proxy over what it was, just so I can make sure I can kind of get those guys, and other people just kind of back off thinking, oh, it's not just $5 or $6. It's obviously more. I'm just going to go to this next guy, and then kind of the same thing, and they just get off my guys altogether.
Yeah. It's hard for me to wrap around my head around that philosophy. I don't really see it. I have a hard time seeing a way that you come out of that, and at the end of it, you think, wow, I got these 6 guys or these 8 guys or whatever it might be, especially if you don't have so much money that you can just get the 6 or 8
and that's what guys. It has to be. You have to have, like I was saying, I mean, you have to have the money to do that. You can't
right.
money.
So you're saying if you miss out on number 1, if you miss out on your Corey Davis number 1, at least I got 2 and 3 and 5. And 7, I feel better that way. If you're down a little bit in money, if you're 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, it's really difficult to feel good about your auction or your rookie class afterwards. If you have 5 or 6 guys and none of them fall in that top 6 this year, or maybe weren't those top 2 or 3 a year ago, that's really tough for me. That's a tough pill to swallow for sure. So talking a little bit more about having that most money, let's talk a little bit about that, like other, I don't know, league rules, league setups. I think having the most money and taking that top-heavy approach and trying to get that top guy, especially in contract leagues, is really important. If your league requires a contract, and especially if it's difficult to re-sign the player at the end of the contract, getting these top guys, these guys that are going to perform right away, is incredibly important. This is one-time dead presidents. Exactly. If you are in an auction, of course, that's not an auction, that's a draft. So we can't really talk about that one. If that were an auction, though, that's the league where you would want to put everything you got, especially if you're 3rd or 4th. If you only come out with one guy, get into the bidding war. If Corey Davis is your guy and he's the number 1 pick, I have no problem going all in, spending every dollar you got, have one guy on your list, and trying to get that guy that you can immediately put into your roster, because you only have a 4-year window, 5-year window with this guy. Chad, you're nodding your head. I imagine you agree.
Oh, totally. Yeah, you have to. I mean, especially with Corey Davis. I mean, he's my clear 101 in this, but all the auctions I do are Devies, unfortunately. So Corey Davis isn't an option at this point.
Yeah, he's been gone for years, maybe 2 years already for a lot of guys, especially if you're in a league with Nick Whalen.
Yeah, exactly.
So what about Nick Whalen? Exactly. How about you, Matt? Are you willing to go all in a contract league?
Oh, for sure, because if you're going to give a longer contract to a rookie, you want it to be a guy you're pretty sure is going to perform. So, yeah, absolutely. I think maybe in a salary cap league, could be a little bit different. If you can get a few more players, like really cheap players on shorter contracts, it could be, beneficial to yourself. But I think in a straight contract league, you definitely want to go up and get those big guys for sure.
Yeah, and that's a perfect pivot there, Matt. I was just going to mention salary cap leagues is the other one. I play in a lot of salary cap leagues. Chad, I know you're experienced as well. I still think it's a good approach, but it's certainly worth thinking about what Matt just talked about. And it depends completely on the rules. If you're sitting there in a league where every contract is guaranteed for the length of the contract, it's difficult. Or every salary is guaranteed for the length of the contract. It's difficult to pile up a bunch of those low-end $1, $2 third-round pick type players and give them 4 or 5 years, because you're going to have to eat a lot of those contracts, a lot of those dollars down the line. Now, if you're in a league with more flexible rules where you can drop them, I can certainly see what Matt's talking about here, getting a few of those second-round picks, piling in a few of those third-round picks, those $1 type guys in auctions, or $2 type guys in these auctions, taking a bunch of those lottery tickets, but still getting one of your big name guys. I think mostly in a salary cap league, though, Chad, I'm going to go after the big name, the Corey Davis in this case.
Exactly. That's how I am. Just because, like you said, any really second, third round, fourth round picks are darts at this point. And I'd rather have the guy that, the NFL trusts as a top 5 pick, a top 9 pick, top 10, that sort of thing. I'd rather just kind of, grab that guy and run with it. If I make a mistake, I make a mistake, but at least I went all in doing it.
Yeah, and I couldn't agree more. That's what I do a lot as well. So let's talk about one last thing.
Matt's got his hands raised.
Matt. You
trying to be polite.
Don't do to me what Chad did earlier. Matt has something to say. What do you have to say, Matt?
I love that he raised his hand.
I stole that from Dan. I learned it by watching you, man.
Mr. Myler.
No, I wanted to ask you guys a question, because I know how I feel about this, but I'm curious about what you guys think. In a salary cap or even a straight contract league, are you guys more likely to trade away your money for vets in those leagues than you are in just a standard auction or standard draft? Because I definitely am, because I would rather, whether it's taking on a bad contract to free up some cap space later and getting something else on top of it, or just getting a solid guy that I know I'm going to be able to have that's actually going to produce for the length of his contract, is so much more valuable in those types of leagues. So just curious what you guys think about that.
I don't know if I'm more likely. I'm always likely to sell the rookie stuff, the young guy for the vet, the guy that can win me a title this year. I'm always a play now guy, and so I think I probably agree with you, Matt. I'm the guy that will sell rookie money or rookie picks in a heartbeat if I think it's going to help me win a title. So, like I say, I don't know if I'm necessarily more likely to. With that said, I'm gonna look at especially in salary cap leagues, if the salary works out right and I'm saving the cap space, or feel like I can use that cap space to better my team later, especially in leagues where rookies are expensive. I'm definitely more likely in those types of leagues to move on from that rookie pick or that rookie money. Yeah,
I'm kind of the same way. I don't think I have a hard rule on either way. It just really depends also on my team construct. If I know, I'm already young and really these older vets aren't going to help me much in, this year or maybe the next, I'm probably more inclined to, throw some darts at these rookies. But if I'm a contender, I'm more than happy to sell my rookie money and add a vet for cheap, really. I mean, in KS4, this is the only time I sold off all my rookie money in all the KS leagues that I had. I got John Brown and Randall Cobb from it, and I'm okay with it because I didn't have enough money to really do anything with the top tier rookies.
Yeah, I'm kind of the opposite then, Chad, because KS4 was the only one that I had rookie money in. The rest of them,
There's finally a league you didn't do well in, Dan. Finally.
No, we don't have to get into that. So the last other type of league that should be talked about here is Devi leagues, and we touched on it just briefly. Kitchen sink, we all participate in at least a couple of the kitchen sink leagues. How does a league being Devi, Matt, change your philosophy when entering a rookie auction? Are you more likely to sell your money? Are you more likely to go all in on a player? There's less of those top tier players. How does that change your strategy?
Yeah, I did actually try to trade out of the kitchen sink 4 auction, but I just couldn't get really any takers. So if that's the case, then I am definitely going to go hard for the big guys. You know, the most expensive guy, the best talent that I can afford, because there's not that many of them. You know, the best guys in the KS4 in our KS4 auction was Joe Mixon. That was the top guy, and then the next guy was a tight end, Evan Ingram, I believe, was the next guy after that. So you know, that's you know, we've got number. What is that, number 4 and like number 9 or number 10 out of the top 12 that we have sitting there to go get. So, you know, I just feel like in those cases, like if I can get one of those top guys, I'm doing it and not going to mess around too much with the lower tier guys that are going to go for more money than I want to spend on them.
Chad, I imagine you're doing the same thing. Exactly.
I mean, especially if you kind of know, you know, you look around the room, like we've talked about before, money is king in these things, and there's supply and demand. There's not much supply when it comes to rookies in these kitchen sink leagues. So, you know, if you don't have a whole lot of money, I mean, you should try to sell that as quickly as possible, in my opinion.
All right, we've talked a lot about strategy. We're going to talk a little bit about auction trades, as well as a little bit more about this rookie class that's coming at you in just a minute, right after this. Welcome back to the DLF Dynasty Podcast. I'm Dan Myler. I got my good buddies Chad Scott. And what's your name again, Matt? Matt Price? Matt Pricer?
The zookeeper.
The zookeeper. Yeah, that's right. I actually had to look down. What's his last name again?
We both like the same team, Dan. Come on.
Yeah, you should be my favorite. My favorite co-host on the podcast, but you know, as soon as Chad got added to the roster, you got bumped again, dude. Sorry.
I'm feeling it. I'm feeling it. Back down at the rung on the totem pole.
That's horrible. I'm sorry.
Man, I'm sorry. Like Dr. McDreamy, though.
Okay, yeah. Well,
I'll take it.
I got to pump him up a little bit. He kind of looks like Dr. McDreamy.
Yeah,
so.
Wow. I'll take it. I'm gonna tell my wife that. Hopefully, she doesn't laugh later.
Yeah, you know, minus the beard, you got a beard.
All right, so we got a couple more things to talk about before we get out of here tonight, fellas. Let's talk about trading. We did touch on it briefly, but let's talk about general philosophy when it comes to trading, specifically mid-auction. So right when an auction starts off, I would say that's when rookie money is at it is most valuable at that point, because all the players are available. Now, obviously, as more of those players go off the board, that money, having a lot of money, is less and less valuable. How do you react to that when you're either offered a trade or looking to move money mid-auction, Matt? Matt Price?
You know, so I really like to pay attention to who is bidding on what players. So if I notice a bidding war happening before 2 players, I will definitely go in and approach one of them, usually the one that has the lesser amount of money, and say, hey, you know, I've got all this extra cash. You know, you can go and get your guy. You just trade me, you know, whatever player that I'm looking at on your roster. So I think that's one advantage you can that's one thing you can take advantage of mid-auction. But for the most part, you're right. If you're going to trade that money, you need to do it early while there's still assets on the board that people care about. Because once those top 6, 7 guys go off the board, you know, nobody really wants your money that much. You're not going to be able to get nearly as much for it.
Yeah, and what I like to do typically when I'm approaching another owner about a trade like that, maybe somebody like you're saying that's in that bidding war, is I target typically lesser wanted dynasty assets, usually veterans, those guys, especially in those contract and salary cap leagues, those Larry Fitzgeralds as throw-ins. And I'm not talking about the main piece, but if all they're trying to get is 5% or $10 or whatever a low amount is in your rookie auction, you can pick off those vets pretty easily, because what they're thinking is, okay, I get Joe Mixon for Larry Fitzgerald and a cup of coffee. I'm going to do that in a heartbeat. Or all I have to do is send this veteran running back that's going to get 5 or 10 carries a game. Not one is coming to mind at this point. And I get my guy. Of course, I'm going to do that deal. So especially when you're looking at those low end type deals, it's certainly a good time to look for veterans. Chad, are you doing the same thing?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you that I think your money has the most value at the beginning of an auction, but I think it also has the most value when there's one last guy on a tier that's up for auction. And I think that's when you can kind of pounce on people and kind of get back almost to where that top value of your rookie dollar was if they're desperate.
Yeah, so we've mentioned 3 really good points for when to trade your money. Right at the beginning, when everybody's available, when that big auction is happening, those 2 guys are going back and forth and you're seeing that bidding war, and then when there's that last guy left, specifically in years like this year when there's 6 of them and everybody really goes into an auction thinking, I'm going to get one of those 6 guys, even though I'm 7th on the list. I feel like I should. Everybody wants one, so you can get your hands on them. How do you know, Chad, when to sell out, when to get out of your money? You said you did it earlier in Kitchen Sink 4. How did you know that right now is the time? I got to get rid of this money. I'm not going to get one of my guys. Get what I can while I can.
You know, I don't know if you know. It's just more of like this gut feeling. Like the KS4 auction just was not kind of going my way. I messed it up completely because I didn't have enough money. I nominated late. And you know, I just kept getting caught with my money somewhere and then outbid, and then other people's closed. And so there was a point where I was just like, I sent a league message saying I'm selling all my money. Come get it. And
you just got an offer that you thought was good enough to get out.
Yeah, I mean, you know, John Brown and Randall Cobb aren't, you know, the greatest of receivers, but, you know, they have 3-year contracts. They're veterans. And, you know, I didn't come away from the draft with just darts. I have NFL starters, and I can use them, hopefully.
Yeah, guys, you can at least get into your starting lineup. You weren't going to get elite talent, so you thought you'd bring in, instead of taking those dart throws at the bottom of the 2nd round type guys, 3rd round guys, you instead went and got some vets that have done it before and still have that upside. Exactly. Matt, I always put my rookie money on the trade block. I always send that message to let people know that I'm willing to trade, because you're always one email away from that guy saying, wow, his money would put me over the top. Now I get Corey Davis. Now I get Joe Mixon. I imagine you got to do the same thing. Is that typically how you approach an auction when you're thinking trade?
Oh, absolutely. I think, in fact, like 1 minute after Ryan sent the announcement that the auction was going to start tomorrow or whatever it was for Kitchen Sink 4, I think I was like 1 minute later, I had an email out saying, hey, I got $382 available. Come get it. Unfortunately, didn't get any takers this time, but yeah, I'm always on top of that. I'm always looking to move money for an asset that I know can help me win this year.
And the opposite side of this coin is you know, you're not looking to get anything over on anybody. Yeah, somebody might have sent you the offer thinking legitimately, wow, this gets my guy. I get Mixon now for sure, plus whatever pieces I can put around him. And all I have to do is send these 2 vets. I'm not in win now mode anyway. Matt is. So it's not like you're trying to pull the wool over anybody's eyes or anything like that. It's just taking advantage of what you have, and sending the offer, as we all know as dynasty owners, is never a bad thing. So let's spend the last few minutes talking a little bit more about this year's specific class, fellas. We've talked a lot about those top guys, but let's touch on them one more time. Let's imagine, Chad, you have the number one, you have the most money. What are you going to do to get your guy? You said Corey Davis is your number one guy. Your rebuild, it's time to get a legit franchise player, cornerstone guy. What are you willing to do? Are you going to spend as much as it takes, as much as the number 2 guy has, or are you pivoting off at some point?
I'm pivoting off at some point. I mean, I'm going to let somebody else overspend. And then, I mean, I'm fine with getting, you know, the 102, 104, 106 instead of just the 101, if need be. It just really depends on what the room is doing. And that kind of dictates on what I'll do. I'll put a nice bid on them, but if they go over, then, you know, there'll come a point where I'm looking elsewhere.
Yeah. How about you, Matt? You got the most money. What are you doing to get your number? Who's your number one guy, and what are you doing to get him?
So I think most people have a top like tier of like 6 or 4. My top tier is 3. So if I can get one of Davis, McCaffrey, or Fournette, I don't really care which one it is, and I want to take whichever one is the cheapest, so I still have enough money to go and get a bunch of other targets. Because if I'm picking 101, unless I lucked into it through a trade or whatever, then it's a good bet that I have more than one need on my team. So I'm going to try to get the lowest price top guy, and then I'm going to move on and try to get a guy from my next tier as well.
Exactly. I agree with you guys completely. So let's flip it a little bit here. Now you say you got that tier of 3. Are you going all in to get 2 of those? You can have 2 of them, but you got to spend every dollar you got, and you have the most money. Are you willing to do that?
It depends on so much on roster construction, but I would probably say I want at least one of them, and if the price is right to get 2, I don't think I would spend every single dollar I have on 2. Now, if I could get both Davis and Fournette and then have a lead wide receiver 1 and wide receiver 2 to start my team with, I'd probably be okay with that, but I think I would rather get one of those guys, and then like Chad was talking about, get somebody down at 106 like Mike Williams and Dalvin Cook or whoever you have down there, and then maybe also come in and get one of the top 3 tight ends. I kind of feel like I would like my team a lot more from that strategy than just to get 2 of those top 3 guys.
I probably would too, but it would be hard to say no to getting both Fournette and Davis if you had the chance.
Yeah. It'd be really hard, but we've talked about this. It's you're still throwing darts. I'd rather have more darts than 2.
Yeah, and I would too for the most part. Now roster construction, it's very tough. As you said, roster construction matters a lot. If you're a championship caliber team and you made the moves and still feel like you're a championship caliber team and you're maybe one piece away, or you really want that extra piece, man, I'd have a hard time saying no to getting 2 of those big time dart throws, for sure. So we covered most everything with that top 6, I would say. Let's move down just a little bit, fellas. Let's talk about the rest of that first round, into the second round. Where do we value these guys? At what point are we giving up a top 6 guy, especially if we're a middle of the tier team? If we have the 6th, 7th, 8th most money, Chad, at what point are you giving up, or what 2 players are you willing to go get, or what 2 players, I guess, do you want in order to give up on that top 6 tier? How high do you have to get your 7 and 8 guy? Do you have to get 7 and 10? Where do you land there?
Probably like a 7-9, 7-10 guy. So I would love to get like an OJ Howard, Kareem Hunt for me.
Yeah,
I'm a big Kareem Hunt guy though.
Right, and like me with Zay Jones, I feel really highly about him, and he feels like the kind of guy, if I could pair him with another guy just outside of that top 6, I'm willing to give up Mike Williams. How about you, Matt? Are you doing the same thing, or you really want one of those top tier guys?
If I have to give up Mike Williams to say Dalvin Cook, and I could go ahead and get 2 of those top 3 tight ends, then I would be okay with that. I'd be okay with maybe Hunt there too. If I'm not really a Ross guy, I know I'm higher than most on Jamal Williams. For me, I think he's at the end of the first round, but you can usually get him way later than that. Yeah. So if we're talking about giving up one of the top 6 guy for somebody, in the bottom half of the first round, I'm probably going to go after 2 of those 3 tight ends, because it seems to be a common narrative these days of, let's just, wait on tight end and then come back and buy them cheaper in a year or 2. But honestly, with this class, with these 3 guys, I don't think you're going to get much of a discount on them in year 2. I think these 3 in particular, if you're planning, that's your strategy, I'm just going to wait and buy it cheap next year, I don't think that's going to work at all. I mean, maybe you're going to get 90, 95 cents on the dollar, but you're definitely not going to get as big a discount on tight ends that you would have in the past few years, So I know I kind of went off on a tangent there.
Yeah, that's all right.
But two of those 3 tight ends would do it for me to get off of a guy like Mike Williams.
I agree with you, Matt, because I think that's been talked a lot about on Twitter. Like, don't drop the tight ends because you can get them cheaper in 10 months. But these aren't just like the ordinary tight ends we're used to. You can do that with guys like Gerald Everett, Johnny Smith, maybe. But you're not going to do that with OJ Howard, Evan Ingram, and Njoku. Nobody's dumb enough to draft them in the top 10, 11, 12, and then trade them 10 months later. I would hope not, but it depends.
And these guys are already in the top 12. Haven't even played a snap. When Gronk goes, when Reed has his 30,000th concussion, when Eifert hurts himself again, these guys are going to be your top 4 to 6 guys. So I just don't see anyone selling them cheaply next year.
When Ladarius Green signs with the team.
Don't remind me, Chad. And for the record, Matt, we don't mind when you go out on a tangent on the DLF podcast at all. Okay, we are running out of time, guys, but I have so many things I want to talk about still. We're not going to get it all in, but here goes. I'm going to try. Vintage Chad Scott, ladies and gentlemen. I heard from somebody. I was talking to somebody and mentioned this topic that we're going to talk about on the podcast. And he said the strategy that he entails is, I have top 3 money. I want a top 3 guy. We have talked about this a little bit, not to get in a bidding war. That kind of strategy certainly can get you into a bidding war. It's also not very accurate, because if you have the 3rd most money and the top 2 guys have more than double your money, you're still not going to get a top 2 guy. So don't get suckered into that kind of thing. There's a couple more questions for you guys before we get out of here. I'm going to need quick answers. And I know you're so good at that so far, with the exception of Chad just saying no to me earlier. You're the first to nominate this year in rookie money. You have the most money. 2-word answer, Chad. Who are you nominating?
Corey Davis.
Matt, who do you nominate?
John Ross, because I want the money out of there.
Oh, you stole my answer. You have the 6th most money, Chad. Who are you nominating?
Corey Davis. I'm going all in no matter what.
Taking the easy way out for sure. Corey Davis is off. He's the only other guy that's been nominated. Who are you nominating?
Oh, he's already nominated. Okay, I'm going Samaje Perine.
Okay, that's a good one. I like that. How about you, Matt?
I'm going to go ahead and get Mike Williams off the board.
Okay, Ross would still be mine, but if that's not
hey, he's already on the board. He's already on the board, man.
Okay, I guess I'm gonna if I'm in a league with Matt, I'm gonna go with any Green Bay Packer, because he loves Jamal Williams. Apparently he's a homer. All right, you only have $1. It's the least money. Everybody else has way more than you, Chad. You can't trade the money. Who are you gonna nominate? Who's that low end guy that you want?
Amara Darboh.
Or at least you want to take a shot at.
Amara Darboh.
Okay, how about you, Matt?
Cooper Kupp, baby.
Oh, yeah, he's your brother. You love that dude. I'm going to take my shots at high-end guys for a few days, for a few nominations, but after that, I'm probably going to go.
Are you saying like at the beginning?
I thought you said
that. Yeah, I know. I was just trying to get one last point in before we wrap this up. I'm going to take a shot because I'm so much smarter than you, Chad. Of course, I was the one asking
with more information.
I'm going to do the homer thing, and I'm going to go after D'Angelo Yancey. He's a $1 guy in all of them, and he's James Jones 2.0 to me. I think he's going to be something someday. And so I'm going to go after him. Last couple of things, guys. You're in a super flex. How high are you going to move the quarterbacks up, Matt?
They're definitely going to go in my top 12, probably top 10, probably right after those tight ends for me.
Is that the same as a rookie draft? Or is that where you're drafting them as well?
I think so, yeah. I think so.
Okay, how about you, Chad?
This year's class.
I'm actually in Superflex. Deshaun Watson is top 6 for me.
Yeah, I kind of think so too. I'm coming along on that.
Especially
philosophy.
Since like with all the hate, you can get him there. If you nominate him like top 6, you're golden.
Yeah, and there are leagues where you can still get him for the 13th most money.
Yep.
So you end up with a good deal. So he's a nice early nomination in Super.
They found you, man.
The cops are here, you guys. They don't like Deshaun Watson, man. They do not like Deshaun Watson.
All right, guys. Last question: who, other than the $1 guys that you mentioned before, who are the other underrated guys you like, Chad? Is there anybody else you want to mention? A guy you're after that you think you can get for $1 or $2 in some of these rookie auctions?
Yeah, I love Johnny Smith. I love Gerald Everett. For tight ends, I'd say I I'm starting to warm towards McNichols as well as a running back.
How about you, Matt? Anybody else you want to throw out there as cheap guys in a rookie auction?
I got two. I want James Conner on every team I can come away with him because I don't think Le'Veon is long for a Steeler uniform. And I also am going to go ahead and toss a buck on Chad Kelly in a Superflex just because.
Yeah, okay. You guys stole a bunch of mine again. I had Smith and Kelly as well as those, especially Smith. He's the guy I want to go after if I get a chance at him. We are all done. We're overtime. We've spent too much time talking about rookie auctions tonight. You should follow my good buddies Matt at Matt Pricer. His last name is Price. You can also follow Chad at Chad_Scott13. You can follow me if you want to. I'm at DMeylor22. That's DMEYLOR 22. And you should be following the DLF Dynasty Podcast at DLF Podcast. Thanks for listening to the 256th episode of the DLF Dynasty Podcast. We'll catch you again next week. Chad's going to be a focused part of that podcast next week. Make sure to check it out. Should be a lot of fun. Thanks again for listening and have a good week.